strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
Hey, it's day 2 of 14 straight days of SWGOH content, and this one is building off of a previous Bounty Hunter video I did. I showed how you can solo Phase 3 of the Heroic Sith raid with Bounty Hunters, and most people loved it. The biggest complaint was that it needed some Relic 7 characters. I shouldn't say it needed them, but it used them, and a lot of people aren't going to be putting 7-tier relics on their bounty hunters anytime soon. So I want to show what it can look like with a bunch of Relic 1, Relic 2. We do have a Relic 6 Jango there, but he's not even the biggest damage dealer, and you don't have to have him Relic 6. That just happens to be what this team had. This was run by Masta. Huge shout out to him for running this and showing how this can be successful with even without having a Relic 7 or a Sing here, for example. So Jango starts out with the 55k hit on the sabers. You don't need to be hitting that hard to start out. It's okay if you don't have a Relic 7 Jango. The sabers have about 35,000 health, so you do not need to be hitting at 55,000 on the sabers to start out the match. That's not needed to down Traya. But the mechanism is going to work the exact same as it did in the previous video. The only difference is this time when we get to the end of Enrage, we're not going to have enough to actually complete the solo. The damage isn't there to get the full 36, I think it's 36 million. But he does get 24 million, which is still a huge chunk of damage there. So you can be very successful running this team, even if you don't have Relic 7 or a Sing, or is obviously the big damage dealer. Did 10 million damage here, even though it's only Relic 1. Getting up to even Relic 2 or 3 is not necessarily that much of a paywall there. So even some room to bump this up fairly cheaply. I do want to talk about a little bit about the mods. Like I said, it's the exact same strategy. You are keeping burn on Traya so that she does not gain turn meter whenever she comes at a topple. And then as long as you can kill off all of the sabers before Traya takes that turn, you're golden. Traya is never going to get a turn. You don't have to mess with isolate. So right there, we had a resist. Burn got resisted. It is okay. Burn lasts for 3 turns. You can still, he keeps checking because he's got burning on there still. This is why Bosk is actually important. Even though Bosk doesn't do a lot of damage here, Bosk has the ability to reduce reduce all bounty hunters cooldowns, including Jango. So that's essentially going to put his burn on a two-turn cooldown. So if it gets resisted once, like it just did there, that is okay. You can have one resist. You just can't have 2 resists in a row, or else you get isolate involved, and it becomes a lot more messy. You can still do a lot of damage, but not near as much as if Traya doesn't take a single turn. So I know I talked about it in the previous video, but I'll go over why you need these specific characters, and then I'm going to go over the mods and how you should mod them, or the different options for modding them depending on how much damage you're doing and how you're getting the run started off. So first off, Jango lead is a must. You do not have to have the Zetas on there, but the Zeta is like one of the Zetas adds, I think, 35% offense when with the Bounty Hunter's Resolve, so it adds offense. It's going to give you more damage, but it's not actually a requirement as far as the Zeta there. But Jango lead is required because when he inflicts burn, it prevents the turn meter gain only if he is the lead. It does not work if he's not the lead. Other character that's a must is IG-88, and the reason he is a must is because after you get this payout here, every time he lands a critical hit, he is going to reduce Traya's tenacity by 10%. That is very important because Traya gains 10% tenacity for every saber that is defeated. So if you don't have IG-88 reducing that tenacity as you go along, you're going to have a lot. By the time you get to the end, you've stacked tenacity way too high. You can't land burn. The run's not going to be able to go to completion. So 88's a must. Aura Sing is the big damage dealer. Technically, you do not have to have her. You could run it without her there, but she does a massive amount of damage with during that topple effect. So her special ability can be used essentially over and over again, and she just does huge amounts of damage. And once you hit payout, you're also going to be giving her, stacking her offense, stacking her critical damage. So right there, she can use that special, take it a turn again, although boss jumped in here, but there we go. Huge hit, 373,000 right there. No standalone, just pure damage right there, which is repeated over and over again. It's only going to increase as the match goes on, because for every saber that's defeated, bounty hunters get 20% critical damage stacking throughout the match. So the damage starts high and just gets higher the further we go along here. So the other two characters we have Bosk. I talked about the importance there. It's also important for him to be taunting whenever those sabers pop up. Sometimes they'll dispel the taunt, but he will at least absorb one hit, because 88 is kind of squishy. So sometimes we have some problems with 88. 88 falling off there. Now if he does die, Bounty Hunter's Resolve is going to revive him once, so you've got a little room for error there. But he's kind of the squishy one that you do have to worry about there. And then Dengar over on the side. Now we've played around with that. Bobo actually works fine. Greedo works fine. Dengar does a little bit of damage, calls some assist. He can use speed down, which is going to get Sing additional turns in throughout the match so that she can do even more damage. So there's a lot of flexibility on the 5th spot. This isn't necessarily required right here. But this was the exact same team that we ran with the solo, so that's why he kept that same team, or it might be as high as bounty hunters as well. I'm not sure, but there's a little bit of flexibility there. So as for modding, first you want to start with Jango. You need to have high potency on Jango, because he has to be landing that burn. We don't know the exact tenacity on Traya, so we don't know really exactly where we need to start. I recommend about 120% potency, which is high, but it's not outlandish by any means. Now I'm going to stop here for just a second, because if I were him, I would have done that standalone differently. So he used standalone to clear the bonds on Traya, so that we're not damaging 88, for example, as much. All these bounty hunters keep taking continuous damage during this part of the run right here, while Traya is not toppled. Oh, by the way, there's the Ares alert. Anyways, trying not to get off track here. I would have used the topple just to take out one of the sabers. So like if you've got 2 sabers left and you're taking out the 3rd one, use that standalone, and then once you take out that 3rd saber, the standalone's gonna pop back off, and you can go into your normal topple rotation and everything like that. The way he did it there, he kind of wasted one of the topples, which cost him a little bit of damage. Not anything necessarily massive, but I think he could have done a little bit more there if he'd used the standalone at a different point. So that's one recommendation I would make to improve the run just a little bit. But okay, anyways, why were we modding? Mod Jango for, I recommend about 120% potency. We don't know exactly what Traya's tenacity is, so it's hard to make an exact recommendation. The longer you go without getting the payout to trigger, the more potency you need, because IG88 won't be reducing that tenacity yet. That doesn't happen until the payout is triggered. So 120 is kind of my recommendation. I think 100 is about the minimum that I would try. I think in this run he had about 104. So if you're hitting triple digits, you should be okay to run it. He didn't get a lot of resist here. There's always going to be a minimum 15% chance to resist too. So just because you get a resist or two, that doesn't mean you need to add more potency. But get that potency first, and then it's all about DPS. So the combination of damage and speed. With any of these, whenever you are modding for damage, offense is actually going to be a little superior than critical damage. So whenever you first start out, critical damage, and when I say when you first start out, at the beginning of the run, before you've toppled Traya, before you've taken out the sabers, critical damage mod sets are going to be doing more damage than offense mod sets. The thing is, once you start adding that critical damage from downing the sabers, the more critical damage you stack, the more favorable that pendulum swings over to offense. And by the time you get about a third of the way through the run or so, depending on your exact mod set, you're switching over to offense being a superior mod set to critical damage. And we're talking about the sets here, not necessarily the primary. It's a little more weighted to critical damage on that primary because the ratio is much different. You only get about 8% offense compared to 42% critical damage. So there's a much higher ratio favoring critical damage there. But for the mod sets, offense is actually going to be superior to critical damage unless you're having problems getting the run going. Because remember, at the very beginning, critical damage will outweigh offense. And you have to be able to do that to damage those sabers before you stack that critical damage. It's always harder at the beginning of the run because by this point here, we're a few turns from enrage. We've stacked so much critical damage that you're one hitting the sabers. You could have G12 and you're still one hitting those sabers. That's not a problem because you've stacked so much crit damage. Like right here, yeah, 128,000 from a basic on IG88. That is not a normal hit that you're going to see in an arena or anything like that. 269. These hits are absolutely huge because we've stacked all that critical damage. So if you, again, my point, if you need help getting the run started at the beginning, go with your critical damage sets. But as long as you're getting through those first few sequences fine, you want to mod for offense. If you are going the complete distance and going to enrage, you're going to get more damage out of offense than you are from critical damage sets. So that applies to Jango. It applies to 88. It applies to Aura Singh here. Watch all this damage on standalone. This should be huge. 1.69 million. That is a nice chunk of change there. I think we get a second one in here probably. No, 700,000. Do we have the offense up there? I'm not sure. I think we may have even fallen out of. Did we fall out of standalone? I don't know. I'm not going to rewind it to check. I'm not sure why the damage wasn't quite as high on the second one. Anyways, where is that? Okay, so the modding. So mod offense for Aura, for Jango, IG88 as well. Now keep in mind with IG88, his critical hits are what reduce tenacity. So when you're modding IG88, you want his critical damage to be at 100%. Although you're going to get 25% critical chance. I'm sorry, I think I said critical damage. You want critical chance at 100%. You're going to get 25% critical chance from Jango's lead once that payout is hit. So you want IG88 at about 75% critical chance to make sure you're always landing critical hits and you are reducing that tenacity. Because if you're not reducing tenacity, burn won't stick towards the end of the run, and you're going to lose out on some damage. So with Boss doesn't really matter too much how you mod him. I would say, I mean, he's going to do a little bit of damage, but not a ton. You don't really need to mod him for health and protection because he's going to be recovering that on his own, and he's pretty tanky anyway, so I don't think you necessarily need to focus on that. You could do tenacity to prevent some days, but he can clear that on his own too a little bit. Speed helps so that he's going back around and doing that mass assist. That's where you get some damage with Bosk and helps reduce those cooldowns. So speed can help, but overall it's not huge there. With Dengar, if you're running Dengar, mod for the same potency you're modding Jango for, so you can land that speed down the same way we land Burn. If you're using Boba instead of Dengar, you can go again with the DPS, that offense mods plus your max speed. And I say offense mods are superior, but if you don't have good speed on your offense mods, then it might still be better to go with crit damage. So speed does play a role in there. The more turns you take, the more damage you do. It's all proportional there. So huge shout out to Masta. He's also my biggest Patreon supporter, so double thanks to him. Not only did he provide the footage, but he's one of my Patreon donors. You saw that Ares pop up in the middle of the run. And that is one thing you get as one of my Patreon supporters. It notifies you whenever your arena rank changes, so that's pretty cool. You can get that. Any of my Patreon supporters, as low as $2 a month, to get that automatically. So that alone is worth it. So sorry for my plug there. But anyways, this is day 2. I think I'm going to be posting this just shortly after midnight. So a very quick video up on day 2, and we've got 12 more to come. So be sure to subscribe. and see what all content I've got for these next 14 days while I'm out after my wrist surgery, which is also why I didn't put my face up on the screen there, because getting dressed when I've got my wrist in a cast and a sling was more difficult than it was worth, so I didn't want to mess with it and just said I'm doing the voiceover with no camera. So anyways, thanks again for everybody's support. Stay tuned. We've got some interesting things coming up, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And leave some comments as always. Let me know what you think of how I'm kind of going along and doing all these videos here. And we'll see what I continue after I get back to work. So thanks a lot, guys, and have a good night.